So here it is, guys. Today's awesome message is taken by our very own Mark Pomeroy. So buckle up and maybe grab your notepad because there's plenty of gifts in there.
Well, hey there, Elevate friends and family. Great to have you with us today for the second week of our brand new series, God Can Make a Way. Now, question, are you familiar with the very famous, very popular, best-selling children's book, We're Going on a Bear Hunt by UK author Michael Rosen? Yes? No? Maybe? All right. Let me just give you a little sneak preview from the man himself.
Chum, 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 chum. We're going on a bear hunt. We're going to catch a big one. What a beautiful day. We're not scared. Uh-oh. Grass. Long wavy grass. We can't go over it. We can't go under it. Oh no, we got to go through it. Swishy, swashy, swishy, swashy, swishy, swashy. Chum, 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 chum. We're going on a bear hunt. We're gonna catch a big one. What a beautiful day. We're not scared. Uh-oh, a river, a deep, cold river. We can't go over it. We can't go under it. Oh no, we got to go through it. Dive in. Splosh, splash, splosh, splash, splosh, splash.
So the story continues, and this family goes through grass, through the river, through mud, through a snowstorm, through a forest, and then they finally come into a cave and they tiptoe up and they see a bear, and then they run away and they go back through all of those same steps, same scenarios, same obstacles that they'd been through on the way to the cave. And when you read the story, every single time they came to one of these scenarios, forest, deep river, snowstorm, they said the exact same thing. We can't go over it. We can't go under it. Oh no, we've got to go through it. And this children's book highlights a reality that you and I, we already know. And that's the fact that in life, there will be obstacles that we can't avoid. A wall, if you like, with opportunities on the other side, with promises on the other side, with possibilities on the other side, that the only way for us to get to the things on the other side is for us to actually go through what seems to be an obstacle. So I want you to grab your smartphone camera, scan the flow code here. It's going to take you to Joshua chapter 6. Now, while you're doing that, let me give you the backstory. So prior to where we're going to drop into, the nation of Israel, the people of Israel, had been held captive as slaves, essentially, in Egypt for hundreds of years. And God, in the latter part of that time, actually promised them that he would deliver them not only out of Egypt, but ultimately into a land. So there's this land that God's promised them, which we kind of just simply call the Promised Land. Okay. And he appointed a guy named Moses, who was part of the Israel community, to lead them. And Moses negotiated their release from Egypt. And then Moses led them through the desert. They had to go through the desert. It's Egypt after all, towards the Promised Land. But the problem was that, well, the main problem, there was a few, but the main problem was they didn't take a direct route. They didn't just go from Egypt to the Promised Land. They wandered and they were complaining and whinging. And anyway, they spent 40 years in the desert, the wilderness, during which time Moses actually passed away, because it was a long time. And Moses, prior to passing away, God said to him, appoint Joshua as your successor. So now we have Joshua leading the nation of Israel. And under Joshua's leadership, they got right up close to the land that God had promised them. But when we drop into the story, we're going to pick it up where they face a physical obstacle, a wall. Walls to the city of Jericho. In fact, it was the first walled city in history, and it would have looked something like this. And by virtue of the geography at the time, the people of Israel couldn't get to the land God had promised them without actually going through Jericho. But the notion of going through Jericho seemed impossible because they faced this obstacle of a physical wall. All right. So in Joshua chapter 6, verse 1, this is history as it's recounted. Now the gates of Jericho were tightly shut because the people were afraid of the Israelites. No one was allowed to go in and no one was allowed to go out. The first lockdown, if you like, we all know about lockdowns now from 4 years ago. But the bonkers thing about the people of Jericho being in lockdown is they said they were in lockdown because they were afraid of the Israelites. The reason that's bonkers is the Israelites, they weren't an army. They were, in effect, 1 million plus refugees. And yet, for some reason, the people of Jericho were terrified of them, that they actually said, we're safer not just letting them in, but if we don't actually go out, because we've heard they're making their way in our direction. So there we have the people of Israel literally standing on the outskirts of the city of Jericho, the walled city of Jericho. And there's a big obstacle in front of them. And what this shows us, or it kind of busts a myth. The myth is that some people make, is that thinking that if there's an obstacle in front of us, well, we must be out of God's will. Because, if we were in God's will, there'd be no walls. There'd be only open doors, clear pathways, all green lights, if you like. If we're in God's will, things would just be easy. It'd be like floating on air, walking on clouds, all the good things. And yet we actually know that the nation of Israel were exactly where God wanted them to be. They were right in God's will, and they were facing a wall. So what's that all about? Well, the big idea today is that if God leads you to it, he will see you through it. We're going to learn and see what that looks like. And spoiler, right off the bat, the nation of Israel, they're going to learn that God actually went ahead of them to the other side of the wall while the wall was still there. One of our team shares a code the same as me. The code being, if you're early to something, you're on time. And if you're on time, well, you're already late. I learned this from my dad. On time means you're already late. And so whenever we have a meeting, a gathering, this particular team member will be there typically 10 to sometimes 15 minutes ahead of the scheduled start time. And what that means in practicality is that everybody else who arrives somewhere in the window between when that team member arrives, 10 to 15 minutes early, what we like to call on time, and then actually on time, that team member will already be there. Well, this is kind of like what God was doing with the Israelites, and it's what God does when we face a wall. He's already on the other side, working for our good and for his glory. But, doesn't mean it's easy. That's the reason it's called an obstacle. And so there we have Joshua leading the people of Israel come against the wall. He wasn't sure what was on the other side of the wall, let alone had a strategy to actually get through this wall. So he kind of smartly sent some spies into the city of Jericho. And they actually entered the city through an inn, like a hotel inn, which was being run by a prostitute named Rahab, which is like, huh? And just culturally, the reality is back in those days, these inns also served as brothels. You could rent a room for an hour, if you know what I'm saying, or you could rent a room for the night. Either way, it was meant to serve weary travelers. So Joshua's Israelite spies were in the inn, and while they were there, word got to the king of Jericho that these Israelite spies had entered the walled city. So he sent a couple of his henchmen down there to the inn, to Rahab's brothel, to check it out. And they knocked on the door. Prior to knocking on the door, Rahab had gotten word that some of the kings of Jericho's henchmen were coming to her place of business. So she stashed the Israelite spies away. She hid them. And then when the henchmen knocked on the door, she opened the door. They asked her, hey, listen, are there some Israelite spies in your place of business? And she said, well, look, they were here, but now they've left. And then she said one of the most famous lines in history, they went that way. Oh, so the henchmen were like, oh, okay, thanks. And off they went in the direction that Rahab had pointed them, looking for the spies, trying to catch them up. And then Rahab went to where she'd hid the spies up on the rooftop. Before the spies went to sleep that night, Rahab went up on the roof to talk with them. She said that this is just bonkers. I know the Lord has given you, the nation of Israel, this land, she told them. We're all afraid of you. Everyone in the land is living in terror. For we have heard how the Lord made a dry path for you through the Red Sea when you left Egypt. No wonder our hearts have melted in fear. No one has the courage to fight after hearing such things. For the Lord your God is the supreme God of the heavens above and of the earth below. God had already gone before them, not just before the spies, but before the entire nation of Israel. God was already working on the other side of the obstacle. And you know, in God's often surprising way, he was working in and through a very unlikely person, a prostitute. And he was sowing seeds of faith in her heart. And he was actually shaping her and enlisting her as an ally to the cause of God. And here's a really great spoiler. When the Israelites actually got through the obstacle, we'll come to that, God specifically instructed them to spare Rahab, the only person. Wow. So, here's a question. What difference, this is like, ask yourself this question, what difference would it make to your perspective as you look at your obstacle, as in when you encounter an obstacle, to know that God's already on the other side of that, moving and working for your benefit and for his glory? What difference would that make to your perspective? You know, it could be a career wall, a family wall, a destructive habit wall, a dream that seems unattainable because it's on the other side. And you might be tempted to write yourself off. You might be tempted to discount it. It's never going to happen. What difference would it make to know that God's already on the other side of that wall, working on your behalf? See, this faith and this knowledge that God goes ahead of us and that he starts working on our behalf on the other side of the obstacle, it allows us to adjust our mindset. Things that we might have considered impossible because of this obstacle, we can start to change our mindset. But a mistake that too many people make when they come up against an obstacle is just concluding and assuming, well, here's the obstacle, so therefore, whatever it was that I was pursuing, whatever it was that God promised, whatever potential, it's not going to happen. Because, hello, everyone, Can't you see the wall? There's a wall here. And our mindset, therefore, in those moments can be the obstacle. You know, like if you think things will never change, well, then guess what? Things will probably never change. If you think you'll never be a good parent, or you'll always be broke, or you'll always be an addict, or you'll never be successful in your business or your career, you never get the grades you need. Well, if you think these things, then guess what? You're probably going to be right. You're probably going to prove those thoughts true. So, let me ask you to ask yourself the very same question again. When you face an obstacle, which you will, and something great, something promising, something filled with potential, something better is on the other side and seems unattainable, what difference would it make to your perspective, to your faith, to know that God's already on the other side, moving and working on your behalf? And by the way, it's important to understand God's not only on the other side working on your behalf, He's actually with you, and typically He's preparing you. In the waiting period isn't a do-nothing period, it's a preparation period. There's something that God's doing, and often something that He asks us to be doing to better prepare us for what He wants us to be and what He wants us to do when ultimately we get the breakthrough that He will set us up for, to step into the promise. There's always a build-up before the breakthrough, and sadly, too many people stop a meter away, a final step away from the breakthrough because they're not willing to allow themselves to do the build-up. Now, I've unlocked level 55 in life, and that means, if you do the math, that I kind of had my teenage years in the 80s. And one of the things that characterized the 80s was hair bands. Bon Jovi, Def Leppard, Poison, bands that were known as much for their big hair as they were for their hits. Then there was this one, Twisted Sister, whose biggest hit, and some would argue only hit, was the song We're Not Gonna Take It. This song, We're Not Gonna Take It, became a massive worldwide hit. Kind of the sort of level of hit that means if they didn't even have another hit, which they probably didn't, they don't need to go and find a 9-to-5 job. They're going to be good. And we can sort of think, oh, well, worldwide hit must be nice. Well, a few years ago, a documentary came out about Twisted Sister, that revealed that the band played 3,267 shows. I'm going to say it again. It's an oddly specific number. 3,267 shows over a 10-year period before they actually even got their first record deal. So well played, Twisted Sister. They understood that there's a build-up before the breakthrough. Just this week, I was reading an interview with Anthony Tan. Anthony Tan is Singapore-based founder and CEO of the company Grab, which is kind of considered like the Uber of Southeast Asia. They do ride sharing, they do food delivery. More recently, they've added financial services to their suite in the app. And in 2021, they actually launched on the NASDAQ in US, the tech stock exchange. And on debut, the company was valued at $40 billion. 40, that's billion with a B, dollars, which, by the way, in that moment made Anthony Tan, one of the co-founders of Grab, worth personally $2 billion. And I know some of you are thinking, well, not net worth of $2 billion must be nice. Yeah, but in the interview, he revealed and recalled that in the early days of the startup, he worked 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. Oh, maybe mustn't be so nice. There's a build-up before the breakthrough, and this build-up is where God continues to form you and shape you and stretch you and increase your capacity and grow your faith and build your skill set. All the things that you're going to need when you enter the land that he's promised on the other side of the wall. The prayers that you pray that nobody knows about. The books you read when all your friends are talking about what they watched on Netflix. The no's you say to the fun stuff because you're doing the work, the hard work, the unglamorous work. The courses you take that are hard on top of what you've already got going on. The mentors you seek out for wisdom in your own time and often at your own expense because you want to grow. The work, the grind, the sacrifice. This stuff is the buildup before the breakthrough. Well, finally, God outlined the strategy to Joshua about how it's go time, the wall is coming down, and this is how it's going to happen. And so he said to Joshua, get the army to march one lap, it's like a few kilometers, few miles, around the city wall, just one lap each day for 6 days. And then march again on the seventh day. Only on the seventh day, I want you in the army to march around the wall 7 times. And after the 7th lap on the 7th day, the walls will come down. Now, church veterans, you know this did actually come true, but just picture yourself in that moment in Joshua's shoes. Okay, God, I'm listening. Yeah, you said, okay, strategy time. Yeah. Wait, what? And not only is it a wait, what moment for Joshua, he knows that I've now got to instruct the army that our strategy involves some walking, getting in those steps. What? See, as much as it had taken faith to get them to that place, they now needed potentially even more faith to follow the plan exactly how God outlined it. Even though, surely, it would have made very little, potentially even no sense at all. So for them now, the test isn't knowing. I mean, they were waiting for the knowing. We think we like the knowing, but now the test is the doing, the obeying. And look, as someone that's been in church leadership for 3 decades, I've lost count of, sadly, how many people and how many times people that I know and have known who have gone through the build-up and yet refused to take the final step of obedience because of things like, well, they thought they knew better. I mean, okay, God, that's a great plan and everything, but I'm just going to do it my way. Or not do it at all, just walk away, dominated by fear. Or maybe like, okay, God, that's a possibility, but can we kind of do this like multiple choice? And they tap out one step before the breakthrough and never get to enter into the potential and the promises and the good stuff that's been waiting for them, that God's put there, that God's been working on their behalf on the other side of the wall. See, the final step still requires faith and obedience. And in fact, I'm going to put it this way. And this is going to sound a little bit harsh, but look, it's true. And is that all of the journeying and all of the preparation and all of the build-up essentially end up on the scrap heap, kind of account for nothing, if we're not willing to take the final step of obedience, even if, maybe especially if, we don't understand it. So, final mic drop. You wanting to know how the story ends? This is how the story ends. The seventh time around, as the priests sounded the long blast of their horns, Joshua commanded the people, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the town." See, wall's still up, but he's claiming the promise already. When the people heard the sound of the ram's horns, they shouted as loud as they could, and suddenly the walls of Jericho collapsed, and the Israelites charged straight into the town and captured it. God can make a way. God can make a way. We talked about last week through your fear. God can make a way through obstacles. And next week, we're going to continue this series with another thing that God can make a way through. So be here, bring someone. Let's continue to see God grow our faith and lead us into higher and better.